There's no better feeling than a personal win, and the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you do just that. Talk to a State Farm agent today to learn how you can bundle and save with the Personal Price Plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
I'm Carol from Sunbury, Ohio. I'm a Republican, but I don't care who does the job as long as the job gets done. That's why I like Sherrod Brown. He stood up to both parties on China and worked with Republicans to fight fentanyl because Sherrod fights for Ohio. That's leadership.
Paid for by friends of Sherrod Brown.
Salah. Escape Cancelo. Oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans. De Bruyne.
And it is what Martinelli, gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tariwa Chanakira, and his guest, Brighton fan Joe Sayers.
It's game week 9, and you know what that means. It's time for another brand new episode of A Tad Predictable. The games are coming thick and fast. We've got European football this week. We've got Carabao Cup next week. But in between is sandwiched some Premier League games. Game week 9, I think we're starting to get a feel for some of these teams, what they're going to be this season. Some maybe obviously are achieving a lot more than was expected of them this season. And then obviously that means there's the reverse where other teams are not doing quite as well. But I'm fortunately joined by one of those, a fan of one of those teams that is doing well this season. Joe, Brighton fan. Joe, welcome back onto the podcast.
Hello, my friend. Yeah, good to be back on. Good to hear your voice. And yeah, really excited to have a chat.
And I'm glad that you're coming back on after a victory and Brighton still doing well. I think they are one of those teams that if you support a different team, it's hard to hate on Brighton. Obviously, you guys have your rivalries in the Premier League, and maybe you'll get to gloat over one of their misfortunes this season. But do you find that as well as a Brighton fan that many of the other fans outside of your direct rivals, of course, are more amenable or happy having Brighton doing well?
I think it's a mixed bag, to be honest. A lot is positive. A lot of away fans that come down to the Amex that I talk to are very complimentary of our football club, and you know, a lot of people say that we are a model football club, and people want their club to be run like us. But I think on the other side of it, there's also quite a bit of jealousy elsewhere as well. And maybe people that don't want Brighton to be doing well, people that don't think that Brighton and Hove Albion are a big enough club to be in the Premier League. I'm looking at you, Rory Jennings. You know, people that look at football on a nostalgia trip. I mean, it's great. It really is. Nostalgic football. I love reminiscing about the olden days. However, we've built this football club. We've earned our right to be in the Premier League, and I think a lot of people can see how well we've been run and how well we're doing. But as I say, it does come with a little bit of jealousy elsewhere, especially when, as you say, other clubs that don't like us aren't doing particularly as well as what we're doing. So Yeah, I think with any club really that does well, it's just a mixed bag of people that are going to be happy for you and people that are going to be a little bit bitter towards you. And I think that's just a reflection of life, really. Is that you never really get 100% happiness, you never really get 100% hatred. There's always going to be a balance. But we're enjoying it. We know it may not last forever. We're very humble as Brighton fans. We've come from the very depths of English football to be where we are today. So whilst it's nice to get the plaudits, we're just going to enjoy it whilst it lasts.
And you reminded me of one of my favorite quotes by Dieter von Tess, which says, "You could be the ripest, juiciest peach in the world, and there's just still going to be somebody who hates peaches." So even though Brighton might be doing things the right way, there's just going to be some people that just aren't. It's not going to sit right with them. But there is another team that is hoping to maybe emulate what Brighton have done in recent seasons, which is climb up that Premier League table. I'm talking about Nottingham Forest, because they've had a really good start to the season. Similar to Brighton, they find themselves in, I guess, a lofty position of 8th place. I'm not sure many people predicted them to be there when the season started, but they traveled to Leicester. Joe, it's a short turnaround for them. They had the Monday game against Crystal Palace, and I'm sure we'll get to Crystal Palace and your thoughts on them soon enough. But quick turnaround, do you think that affects them in this game against Leicester? And then obviously from a Leicester perspective, they come back from a 2-goal deficit against fellow promoted Southampton and get 3 really crucial points at any stage of the season. I think if you're a team that might be fighting relegation, 3 points is important any time you get it.
Yeah, that mentality that Leicester showed against Southampton is something that is going to keep them in this league. They do have a very talented squad. They've got one guy in particular, Facundo Buonanotte, who's on loan from Brighton. And we rate him very highly as a youngster, and I think it's a really good loan move for him. He's being allowed to play more of a natural position that comes sort of easier to him, and has allowed him to adapt and really make an impact on their team. Only 8 games in, so we're really happy to see that. The good thing is that Facundo Buonanotte can't play against Brighton when we come to play Leicester, so that would be nice. He seems to be like a ticking force in their attack. So, whilst he takes points off of rivals around us, I'm hoping he does that against Forest, because, as you say, that they've had a really good start to the season. It is a quick turnaround, but I think you'll see what Forest are really made of, I think. And if they can back up their really good win yesterday against Crystal Palace, that they probably would have hoped that they would have scored more goals. I don't think they were as clinical as they would have liked to be. I think it could be a really, really interesting game. So, looking forward to that one for sure.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I've been impressed with how disciplined Nottingham Forest look. They seem very tough to beat this season, and you can see almost, from the amount of goals that they've conceded this season. They've conceded 6, if I'm not mistaken, which should be the second best in the league. Behind Liverpool, have conceded 3. And then you have, I think, Newcastle have conceded 8. Arsenal have also conceded 8. City conceding 9. So they're a very, very solid team, tough to break down, and then seem to be quite efficient up front in just getting that goal that they need to go and win games and turn games, draws into wins. Certainly, the Liverpool game comes to mind. The Crystal Palace game comes to mind as well recently. I mean, what is it with these strikers that we thought were done with the Premier League scoring goals this season?
Well, I just want to very quickly point out that you say Nottingham Forest have conceded 6 goals this season. Brighton scored 2 of those.
Nice.
I'll take some plaudits there. But as you say, Forest, they're finding goals, and they scored 2 against us. Whereas last season, you maybe would have written them off, and we could have beaten them 2-0 that day. So, they've definitely shown improvements, and they've got experienced figurehead Chris Wood up front, who spent 6 months on loan at Brighton in 2011 and helped us get promoted from League One to the Championship. So it was extra nice to see him score against Crystal Palace on Monday. And agent Chris Wood, he's doing well. So I always enjoy seeing Chris Wood do well. As I say, he was with us for a very short period, but a really successful period. It's good that these names that have been in and around the Premier League for so long continuing to stay there. We've still got Jamie Vardy in the Premier League, and that's just great. So, I'm loving watching them.
And even just having players like Chris Wood that were at the club, even for a short spell, I think it just speaks to how well a club Brighton have been for a while now. Because, if you had players in, League One, Championship type positions that are being showcased in the Premier League now and doing well, it just shows that the eye for talent has been there for quite a while. But in terms of score predictions for this one, are you leaning with the informed team? How are you seeing this one going?
I think it could be a really interesting game. Leicester are probably very buoyant from scoring those 3 goals in the second half against Southampton, as you say, relegation rivals, and I think that'll kick them on to have a really good result against Forest. I say good result. I do think it'll be a draw, and I think that will be a good result for Leicester, considering how well Nottingham Forest has started this season. And so I think I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw with, let's say, just for romance reasons, a Jamie Vardy brace and a Chris Wood brace.
That would certainly please quite a few people. If that ends up the score, I am curious if Nuno Espirito Santos has a plan for Buonanotte, because to me it feels like everything good for Leicester is coming through him in some way, shape or form. Obviously Mavididi also pops up, but he seems to be not as consistent. So I wonder if he ends up having a shadow, some sort of player that just follows him around the pitch and just tries to stifle him.
For someone that's watched a lot of Facundo over the last 2 seasons, if you shift him onto his right foot, he doesn't like it. And what we saw with De Zerbi was that he liked to play a right winger that had a left foot. Someone that cut in, like Solly March, for example. And he tried to operate Facundo Buonanotte in that sort of same area. But teams were just pushing him onto his right foot. He was looking to get onto his left, but just could never do it. So if there was any way that Nuno could sort of stop him in his tracks, it would be to just try and push him out wide and, as you say, have a shadow on him and just keep him on that right foot.
One to look out for. I do think Nuno is going to have a plan from my perspective, and I think it's going to be a frustrating game for Leicester as a result of it. I'm going to rely on the stingy defense of Nottingham Forest and the efficiency of Chris Wood and go with another 1-0 win for Nottingham Forest. I just can't seem to bet against that scoreline with them at the moment, and it seems to be working out well, predicting a scoreline like that. I mean, their last of their last 5 games, 4 of them have been games where not more than 2 goals have been scored in them. 3 1-0s, a 1-1 with Chelsea, and then obviously there was the 2-2 with you guys that you mentioned. But let's move on to our next game. I mean, Aston Villa are playing at time of recording in the Champions League. They will be hosting Bournemouth this coming weekend. Obviously, Bournemouth, one of those teams that was involved in one of the many VAR interjections this weekend, and maybe we'll touch on our thoughts on VAR later on in the podcast. But in terms of Aston Villa, do you feel these are the type of trap games that you get worried about when you're juggling Champions League football and Premier League football, a home game against the Bournemouth side that will be well rested and probably feeling quite confident after the result against Arsenal?
Yeah, obviously Villa coming off of the back of a really good result in the capital against Fulham. But I really do believe that Villa do have a kryptonite somewhere. They do have weaknesses. across their team, and their performances maybe haven't been as convincing as what their results have shown. If you look at the Ipswich game, for example, you can see how Villa can be vulnerable. And I think Bournemouth are a really good team to pounce on those weaknesses and to kill them off a little bit. So I think it's going to be another one of those games where it's going to be both teams sort of cancelling each other out, trying to exploit each other's weaknesses and just seeing who can exploit the most. Bournemouth, a really good result against Arsenal. Obviously, the red card helped, but they still had to go out and win the game against a really good Arsenal side who, even with 10 men, can play really well and create chances. And their manager's done a fantastic job ever since coming in. So, yeah, it's going to be a really exciting game. Can Villa juggle Europe? I think they can. I think they've got a good squad, but as I say, we will see some weaknesses as these games pile up, and will it be too much for them come this weekend? I think it will be another draw for this one, so I'm going to go for a 1-1.
1-1 draw. I think it does help Villa that it's 2 home games, so they don't have to necessarily travel into Europe to play against Bologna, but I am worried about sort of the come down from a Champions League night, having to face a Bournemouth side that is going to test them. We know Bournemouth like to play with the ball and is going to be driving at that, looking to exploit that high line that Aston Villa play. I'm going to go with a 2-1 Bournemouth win. I think Aston Villa, obviously, it's going to be a frustrating day for them losing this one, but I just worry about, I think it's part of the hiccups of getting used to playing and managing Premier League and Champions League games week in, week out. So I'm going to favour Bournemouth to take that confidence from the Arsenal game and go and win this one. They've got a week to prepare. Obviously, Villa will have less time to prepare, less time to rest and recuperate, and I think that maybe is a factor in that one. Let's move on to Brentford versus Ipswich. I mean, I'll start with Ipswich because obviously there's no secret that I have a secret love for them this season. I've enjoyed their climb up the Premier League, up the leagues within within England, and similar to Brighton, I like the way that they run off the pitch, and I think it's bled into their performances on the pitch, and certainly as they were coming up. Frustratingly for me, though. And we've seen it with Southampton as well. You're going to get punished in the Premier League for being sloppy, playing out of the back. If either you need to shore that up and be better at doing it, or you have to change your game plan. You've got to pick one or the other, because maybe in the Championship, if you misplace a pass or the other team counter press you well enough, they might not score that chance. But the Premier League is, you got really lethal players here. You cannot afford to be giving them, unforced error chances, because it's already tough as it is in the Premier League. Do you think there comes a point in time where they have to make that decision of a change of style, or do they persist with this style and just improve their ability to sort of build up from the back? And then from a Brentford side, I mean, if I'm them, I'm looking at this game and I'm thinking, we've got the likes of Mbeumo that like to just buzz around and press people. This is a perfect opportunity to really press high on Ipswich and get a couple of goals from unforced errors and sort of shake off that Man United result on the weekend.
By the time you're finished listening to this Pepsi Zero Sugar, you'll be 15 seconds closer to kickoff. Stock up now. Bengals game day is so close, you can almost taste it. Bengals watching. Better with Pepsi.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Deciding which credit card or loan is right for you is like trying to choose where you want to eat for dinner. Except when you finally get to the restaurant, the menu's riddled with jargon that no average foodie could understand. So at Credit Karma, we keep things simple. We show you personalized recommendations that align with your money goals and help you turn the confusing fine print into terms you can actually understand. And as a cherry on top, we provide a detailed overview for a new card or loan before you apply. That way, we can help you make decisions faster and with more confidence. Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
Yeah, I think talking about Ipswich and their style, I do think that they have it within them to be resolute and to eke out results when they really need to. Their result against us, for example, was obviously a 0-0 draw. Muric turned up and had the game of his life. I'm not going to sit here and say that they weren't conceding chances. They were, but their goalkeeper was just having a fantastic day. But there were moments in that game where they were very, very solid, and they looked to hit us on the counter-attack, and they hit the post. They could have easily come away from that game winning that 1-0. But when you look at that as well, those are the moments that you've got to capitalise on, and that's where you've got to be really clinical in the Premier League, because come the end of the season, had they have taken 3 points there, that could have been so important in staying up. I think with newly promoted sides like Ipswich, like Luton, like we saw last season, if they get off to a really good start, they can build on that momentum. For example, if you remember Huddersfield when they came up, and they had such a great start, and that kept them in the Premier League. Obviously, they suffered the season after and went down, but that beginning momentum really set them well for the rest of the season. I think for Ipswich, I don't think that momentum is going to continue, and I think there is going to be a battle of what can McKenna do to really keep this Ipswich side in the Premier League. I'm not sure it's going to be successful. Whereas Brentford, as you say, they want to come back to winning ways, and they've got some unbelievable players that can hurt teams. And I think Ipswich will get hurt this weekend. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 win for Brentford.
Yeah, I'm worried for Ipswich this weekend. I just think styles make fights, and the Brentford team match up quite well with them. I will say on the other side of it, Ipswich will obviously point to some of the chances that they did create from playing out the back. So I know it's natural to focus on every time they mess up from playing out the back, and then not equally point out the times when they're successfully playing out from the back. So yeah, I think that is an important thing to point out, but you have to take into account that in the Premier League, you are going to get punished. Almost any time you make those unforced errors, that's just the nature of the beast that they're in. I'm hoping for a 1-1 draw, but you know what? I'm going to go with my heart here rather than my head. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw for Ipswich. I know they still are waiting for that first win of the season, but they've had a couple of draws. They've had a couple of steely draws in recent weeks as well. I think a draw here will just stop the bleeding a little bit after that 4-1 West Ham loss, and then obviously the 2-0 Everton loss last weekend. So hopefully me voting with my heart works out for them there, and they're able to get a result. Let's move on to your Brighton. We'll be hosting Wolves. I mean, Wolves, bottom of the log. I don't know if it reaches a certain point where being unlucky is no longer going to cut it. I mean, from my perspective, every single time I watch Wolves, I feel like they're being unlucky. I don't feel like they're the worst team in the Premier League. I don't feel like if I was to, sort of guess what the league table looks like based on performances rather than necessarily scorelines, obviously, I would have Wolves, probably slightly outside the relegation zone. I think they've given good performances in recent weeks. I think obviously they were unlucky with the decision over the weekend with Man City. I think that decision could go either way, where there are players in the line of sight of a goalkeeper or preventing a goalkeeper from saving a shot. That interpretation has been discussed to death since that game has happened. But for them, it's not the right time to be playing Brighton, unfortunately. But you can probably speak a lot better to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those games as a Brighton fan you worry about a little bit because, yeah, we've been doing fantastically well, and Wolves, you know, they can't buy a win at the moment. They came to us in the whatever round it was in the Carabao Cup, and they played, I think, a relatively strong side. I don't think they had a centre back though, but there were moments in that game where they made the pressure tell and they scored a couple of goals. It's just that we scored more than them, and I think that's the issue for Wolves, is that whilst they could probably score a few goals if Brighton had an off day, I think they will still continue to be leaky. And 8 games into a season and you've put 1 point on the table. Gary O'Neill spoke before the Man City game about how important it was to start putting at least a point, at least a couple more points on the table. So I think they're going to come to the Amex. I think they're going to try to be really defensively resolute and maybe play out for a draw. And that for us, you know, is not ideal. We don't really like playing against teams that just come to the Amex and park the bus a little bit and you know, start to just defend for their lives. And yeah, I don't know if it's just me being a really negative Brighton fan, but yeah, I could see this one going a little bit pear-shaped, even though the form table says completely different. So I'm going to go with my heart, though. I do think that we would come off the back of a really good result against Newcastle. We had to show our defensive resilience as well. And that was a completely new side to us. So yeah, I'm going to go, hopefully, a 2-0 win for Brighton.
I think I'm excited to see sort of Brighton wingers versus the Wolves fullbacks. We know Aiton Nuri is one of their feature players, whether it's going forward, but also defensively, for example. I know every time he plays Mo Salah, he has the game of his life, but I'm curious to see how Brighton are able to, you know, go up against the likes of Semedo and Aiton Nuri and be successful out wide against them. And then obviously, I think the good news, if I'm not mistaken, is Danny Welbeck's injury is not as serious as was first, I guess, thought when the stretcher and stuff comes out.
Yeah, that was a terrifying moment at the weekend. It did not look good at all. The way he went down, there wasn't much contact from Fabian Schär at all. So whenever there's not much contact and a player's in that much pain, it's a huge worry. And when that stretcher comes out and he's being sort of strapped up to make sure he doesn't move as much, of course, with a back injury, you can't be too careful anyway. So that was my hope when he went off, was that they were just being extra careful. And it looks like that's the case. He mentioned that he was quite sore, a little bit bruised, a little bit battered. However, he should be back in training very soon, hopefully at the end of this week. I do think this fixture will come a little bit too soon for him. I'm not sure if that fills me with much promise, because the only person we've got to come in, and you might laugh at me for saying this, but the only person we've got to come in ahead of him is Evan Ferguson. Whilst he, on paper, is a fantastic option, at the moment, confidence is at an all-time low. And I think he needs a run of games to get back to the Evan Ferguson that we know he can be. Obviously, I hope that it's against Wolves and he can score a couple of goals and put his season back on track. But Danny Welbeck has been absolutely fantastic for us. For the last 4 or 5 seasons, he has been there to score us really important goals. So I think he'll be a miss this weekend. I do hope he comes back fighting fit. And the race for the Golden Boot alongside Erling Haaland is going to be generational.
And Chris Wood, can't forget him.
And Chris Wood and Jamie Vardy, of course.
Oh my word, absolutely incredible. Well, I think for Ferguson, obviously, that ankle injury towards the end of the season. It's going to take a while just to get back up and running. I think it's fair to allow him that chance to get back up and running. But yeah, for me, I keep saying I really think Wolves are better than what their league table position is showing, and then the results that they've had. But at some point, if a team continues to be unlucky, you have to start looking deeper than just, oh, they're unlucky. And I wonder if Brighton are coming, a team that's in form, a team that I think is playing with confidence. Yes, they might not have all their attackers available at the moment. João Pedro also is fighting to be fit in the next month or so. I still think Brighton have enough. I'm going to go with a 1-0 Brighton win here. What scoreline predictions do you have?
Can I change my scoreline? I said 2-0 Brighton, but I've just had a look back through Wolves' results, and they've conceded 24 goals.
Oh, geez.
And it's 8 games in. That is a very, very leaky defence. I mean, we scored 3 against them in the Carabao Cup as well, and that was with a second-string team. Do you know what? I'm for the first time ever, I'm going to be confident, and it's going to make me look like an absolute mug when we lose 1-0. But I'm going to say Brighton win this 5-0.
5? Wow, you really swung for the fence. I thought you were going to go 3 or something, but wow. I love the
Brentford scored 5 against them. Villa scored 3 against them. Chelsea scored 6 against them. They are known to concede a lot of goals. I know they obviously defended very well against the Man City side, who can score a lot of goals. But I think
I think Brighton's play is a bit more direct than City's. But if you look at the 2 games where they did only concede to, the City game and the Liverpool game, I don't think Liverpool and City play as direct as a Chelsea, as a Brentford, as an Aston Villa. So yeah, I'm going to bump mine to a 2-0. I do think we need to. I'm going to balance you out there with your 5-0, but I'm going to go 2-0. But yeah, I think I'm worried about that shaky defense. That's probably where the unlucky stops when you start conceding that many goals in that shorter space of time. But let's move on to the aforementioned Man City. Sneak by Wolves. I mentioned the fact of the VAR incident, which we will talk about in a little bit. But the weird thing for me, before I move on to Southampton, is for Man City, the narrative is that they're not playing well, they're not firing in all cylinders. They've had some testing games where they could have dropped points. Obviously, the Wolves game, and then the previous time we saw them playing before the international break, that game against Fulham where Adama Traore missed like 50 chances. They are chinks in the armor, but they're still 1 point off of first place. Like, to me, that's more scary than the fact that people think they're chinks in the armor. The fact that people aren't impressed with how they're playing, yet they're only 1 point behind the league leaders, and they're in their championship era. I don't think they're in their style points era. It's just about winning games and getting through them, and they've got that championship mentality to be able to win games even when they're not necessarily playing well. But I don't see them having too much of an issue against a Southampton side that do like to play with the ball. I do like to play from the back. I think anytime City play a team that likes to be quite possession heavy and be a City light, but not have the caliber of players that City have, cities tend to do quite well against them. So I'm going to go, I know you mentioned 5-0 in the previous game. I'm going to bring that 5-0 down to this game. I'm going to say 5-0 to City against Southampton.
Yeah, I think it could be a bloodbath. I mean, City are off the back of a frustrating performance against Wolves, but they found a way to win it, as you say, and that's what champions do. Pep Guardiola is a generational manager. I don't think we'll ever see a manager as good as him for a very long time. So he's changed the way football is landscaped across the whole world. not just in a country. He has literally changed the way football is thought about. And as you say, that there's so many Manchester City lights around the world that want to be Manchester City, but they just can't be. You can be Manchester City when you've got the brain of Pep Guardiola, and there's only one of those. I do fear for Southampton. I think they've got a little bit of a backbone made out of tissue paper, and it's just going to be ripped apart this weekend. I think Man City win this 6-0.
You've one-upped me there. All right.
I have. Erling Haaland double hat-trick.
And look, the thing is, Erling Haaland hasn't scored since I brought him into my fantasy team. So I'm sure he's frustrated, and I feel bad for Southampton. He probably takes out his frustrations on them if Pep decides to play him for long enough in that game. But we've reached our halfway point, and I'd be remiss not to mention that this podcast is presented by EPLindex.com in association with our presenting sponsors, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. You guys can check out their services at libertyshield.com. If you use the coupon code EPL25, you can get 25% off of either the router or the software VPN. The software VPN downloads straight onto your devices. It's a virtual private network, which is a technology that allows you to stay safe online by encrypting your internet traffic to protect your online identity, hide your IP address, and shield your online data from third parties. You'll also be able to change your location, thus allowing you to access content from all over the world. You can avoid geo-blocks and government-imposed restrictions to access any website. And we thank them for sponsoring the show. But Joe, before we go on to talk about the ever-topical, ever-present VAR and what we feel about it, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after these short messages.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by CarMax. Boldly searching for your next used vehicle? With CarMax, you don't have to settle on anything when it comes to your ride. Instead, steer clear of the ordinary and buy the car that's right for you. Because CarMax makes it easy to stop settling and find a car you'll love today. Start shopping now at CarMax.com. CarMax, the way car buying should be.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality bikes, which might lead to another discovery. Getting back in the saddle isn't always comfortable. Good news is Sierra has massage guns. And chafe wipes, too. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
All right, we are back. We're talking VAR. I mean, this past weekend, there were quite a few incidents where VAR was heavily involved. You look at the Arsenal incident where Saliba gets a red card for taking down Evan Nielsen at the halfway line. Arsenal fans were arguing about, Ben White could probably have gotten back. I don't see how that happens. He was about 26 odd yards away from the ball. And their goalkeeper, Raya, was pedaling backwards, not running towards the ball. So I think it was... I don't see why it's as controversial as Arsenal fans were making it out to be. I think they were clutching at straws. And that one sort of just takes care of itself. We also then saw in the Man City game where Bernardo Silva is standing basically backing into the goalkeeper during a corner kick. The corner kick gets taken. As Stones is heading the ball, Bernardo Silva finally moves away from the goalkeeper and sort of ducks. And Stones heads the ball basically over the head of the goalkeeper. The keeper can't lift his hands quick enough to stop the goal. Initially ruled out by the on-field officials, but then VAR asked them to check to say whether or not Bernardo Silva was interfering, was in the line of sight of the goalkeeper. The decision ended up being based on the fact that they didn't feel that he was in the side of the goalkeeper and thus not impacting, the goalkeeper's ability to save the ball. And that's why the decision was overturned and the goal was allowed. We saw Mohamed Kudus in the Tottenham game where he sort of kicked out at Van der Ven a couple of times. He then pushed Van der Ven and then pushed Saar, I think, as well. And initially he got a yellow card, Van der Ven got a yellow card, but then after VAR recommended that the referee go and look at the incidents again, he ends up getting a red card. The yellow card gets taken away, he gets a red card. I think, again, I don't see any issues with that. I think that's a perfect example of VAR being used in the right way, where the ref maybe didn't quite see the angle where the player's pushing someone and then pushing people twice and, pushing people in the face as well. That's a clear red card for me. And then we had, in the Liverpool game, Curtis Jones running in on goal. The keeper gets contact with the ball with his calf and then sort of bundles Curtis Jones over. Initially, obviously, as a Liverpool fan, I'm thinking penalty straight away. It ends up, the referee ends up going to look at it at the screen, and it ends up being not a penalty because of the contact that the goalkeeper made with the ball. As I said, it almost touched his calf before he clattered into Curtis Jones. I think with that decision, anywhere else on the pitch, it's a free kick, but in the box, it's not given as a penalty. I'm okay with that in the sense of, because we kind of know that's how it's being ruled or refereed, that's what you're going to get from the referees. But with any of these decisions, Joanne, which is probably the issue when it comes to VAR and officiating at the moment, is any of those decisions later on in the season, we're going to get the exact same situation, but it's going to be a completely different result to the ones that we got this weekend. How are you feeling about VAR, maybe this season or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, the interpretation of football rules has always been a bone of contention, and I think it will be forever. We're never going to have a perfectly officiated game. Even if we had, computers doing it, people would still disagree. I think it's still part of the beauty of football. I'm not saying that VAR is part of the beauty. I think the everything around refereeing is all part of what makes football incredible. We want our game to be officiated in the best, most consistent way. And to do that, you have to apply the rules consistently across the whole season. That's where the frustration comes in. When, as you say, in 5 weeks' time, there will be exactly the same issue where there's for example, a Brighton player stood on the Man City goalkeeper, we score a goal and it's ruled out, and Man City are given that decision in favour of them. That's where people draw the line of, we just want consistency. We want full transparency. If the referees came out every week and explained their decisions, I don't think there would be nearly as much uproar as there is. What we're having is a officiating board not really taking accountability for when they mess up. Obviously, there's the PGMOL statement, there's the ref watch that you see on Monday Night Football and Saturday Night Football, whatever it is. That's all great. It's all great that we get the audio after the incidents have happened, and that transparency then becomes clear 2 weeks later. Fantastic. I love hearing that. I love understanding why a referee has made a decision, because not only does it give me clarity in what I've just watched, it also helps me learn more about football. But I think that should happen live. And as and when a decision is being made, you're hearing why a referee is making that decision. I think it nullifies probably about 80% of why people get so angry. If you heard the referee explaining why, I think it then gives you more clarity.
Yeah, I think I'll keep my thoughts short and sweet in the sense that I do think there's a bit of arrogance or maybe protection when it comes to football, because every other major sport, the equivalent of VAR or video assistance, it's all done live. We can hear them, they're mic'd up, they're explaining the decision as they're making the decision, and whilst they're going through the decision-making process, we can hear all of those conversations. So I don't see why football is so different that can't happen there. So as I said, whether it's arrogance or just they don't want to expose, maybe that the process of the decision-making is not always the greatest. Maybe it's something that they're worried about, but I don't see a reason why they're not mic'd up and they're not explaining decisions as they're going on. I think the concept of VAR is needed because there are clear and obvious situations where the referees just make a mistake, and they're human. They're going to make mistakes. You can't expect them to be perfect. But as you said, it's just the implementation of VAR. Maybe it's not the best at the moment, but hopefully they're able to continue to fix that. Let's move on to the rest of our fixtures. We kick off with the second half of the show with Everton versus Fulham. I think, Joe, for me, Everton are in sort of a patch of games where they've got some winnable games. I think this is where Everton separate themselves from the relegated teams and probably then not necessarily secure, obviously, mathematically, it's still early in the season, but just secure enough breathing room that they can keep the relegation zone at arm's length for the rest of the season and then start looking further up the table. But it's against a Fulham side who back-to-back defeats, but have been quite good for a lot of parts this season. How are you seeing this game shaping up? I mean, it's at Goodison Park. I'm looking forward to watching this one personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of Everton fans that are getting excited after this weekend of beating Ipswich. It's rich for me to say this, and people will quote me for saying this. But obviously Brighton didn't beat Ipswich, but they're getting excited about beating a relegation rival. That's your bread and butter. That's your Everton Football Club. You're one of the most sort of prominent teams in the Premier League. That's what you should be doing. I think they'll have a little bit of a smack down to earth this weekend, and the pressure of the Everton crowd as well. If Fulham come out the traps and get an early goal, Goodison turns so quickly. I think that their fan base is very, very fragile at the moment, and their team mentality is very fragile as well. So whilst I think that obviously it's good for them to win against Ipswich and get that little bit of a bounce, it's so fragile, and anything that Fulham do good could just throw that off again. That's what I worry about with Everton across the course of the season, is that they won't be able to keep up that consistency to, save themselves yet again. I think there will come a time where their season is just not good enough to stay in the Premier League, and they don't want it to be this season because they get their new stadium next season. And I know what it's like to be moving stadiums from one season to another as a Brighton fan. We did that on the back of a promotion season, and we were very lucky for that. You don't want to be coming into the Championship in a new 60,000-seater stadium. I think they'd fill it. They absolutely would, and they would bounce straight back up. But they've got to be really careful. But I think Fulham win this one. I think I'll go 2-0 Fulham.
But it makes for an exciting game then, because as you said, the crowd, it's almost kicking every ball at Goodison Park at the moment because of the desperation of not wanting to slip down or be involved in another relegation battle for a club, as you mentioned, of the stature of Everton. They really should be doing a lot better than what they've been doing this season. I mean, in recent seasons. But I think for me, I'm starting to see good signs. I'm starting to see Sean Dyche get a bit more discipline in the team defensively. They've got some exciting players with the likes of Ndia. McNeil is starting to showcase a bit more going forward. I think the fact that goals are coming from elsewhere other than DCL and a huge emphasis on just him being the sole goal scorer and breadwinner, so to speak, for the team, is helping them out quite a bit. I think Fulham missing Joaquin Anderson will be a big miss for them, and I can see Everton going and winning this one. I'm going to mirror you, and I'm going to go 2-1 to Everton in this game. And as I said, for me, this is an opportunity for Everton to try and put as much distance between themselves and the relegation zone as possible during these more favourable fixtures than maybe they've had in recent weeks, and then see where they are in the table. But let's move on to Chelsea versus Newcastle. Joe, I think this is a very, very interesting game. Two sides who probably have Champions League aspirations for this season. Chelsea maybe have been written off after what they did last season. Newcastle, question marks heading into this season, a bit of uncertainty with some of their players. Newcastle have looked sluggish to me this season. I think they've been sloppy at times and maybe not have been punished as much, but we certainly saw this past weekend that you can't continue to play the way that they were playing and not be punished in the Premier League. And obviously you would be excited with the fact that the result went your way this weekend. But from a Chelsea perspective, as I mentioned, Liverpool's a stingy defense, but Chelsea's attack has been firing this season. Third most goals so far this season. I think maybe some of that is inflated with that massive Wolves game that you mentioned earlier in the podcast. But what are you making of Chelsea this season? And then obviously Newcastle maybe looking a bit better with the focal point of Isak. How did you find them this weekend?
Yeah, I hate that I'm about to do this, but I'm about to give Chelsea credit. Makes me feel sick. So I will have to go and wash my mouth out after this podcast. I mean, there's no denying that Chelsea are a force to be reckoned with this season, and I do think Maresca is going to have them playing some really good football in the next couple of years. It's about, well, even the next couple of years, towards the end of the season, it's about whether Chelsea can have that patience. And I don't mean with their fans. I think their real match-going fans are very patient bunches. I've spoken to a lot of proper Chelsea fans who even wanted to give Graham Potter more time because they thought that he might have come good, which is, for me as a Brighton fan, hilarious. But I do think Maresca is a very good coach. Obviously got Leicester promoted last season, and quite emphatically in the end, it didn't look like it was going to be, but he got them up and they won the championship. So, it's going to make for a really interesting game because, as you say, Newcastle have just been so far off of what you expect from them. They've got so many good players, and Isak leading that attack and Anthony Gordon running down the wing. You would expect there to be a lot more clinical finishes, but there just wasn't. And obviously, we were very lucky in that we rode every wave that they threw at us this weekend. And I don't think it was a case of Newcastle being wasteful. I think it was a case of us just frustrating them and sort of outwitting them defensively, and Bart Verbruggen having an unbelievable game. So we were very thankful for that. But they are a good side. They've got a very good manager. Eddie Howe, I think, is one of the best coaches in the country, and I think every coach goes through, down patches, and I think this is a down patch for Newcastle, and whether they're bored, stick around and remain patient with him, it is another thing that remains to be seen. But I think they should stick with him, and I think that they can get that culture back somehow. I do think this game comes at a completely wrong time for them, though. I think their confidence will be down from them not scoring against us in the 97 minutes that we played at the weekend. I think Chelsea win this one 3-1.
And that will be music to Chelsea fans' ears. And, you did warn people that you were going to be favourable to Chelsea in this one. Yeah, I'm worried about the sloppiness of Newcastle. I think Chelsea's attack is going to enjoy playing this game. I'm going to go 3-1. I do think Newcastle get one maybe on the counter attack, I think, my thoughts on Chelsea are more long-term in terms of, is he able to keep all of those players happy over the course of a season? But I think it's still too early to see whether or not he can or cannot do that. But let's move on to Crystal Palace versus Tottenham. Obviously, a London derby in this one. Palace, Joe, they looked lifeless to me in the game on Monday night. And I say that in terms of the spark we saw from them to end the season last season. We have to admit, they were playing scintillating football. They looked like maybe one of the teams that could try and sneak into that proverbial top six heading into the season. But it's gone completely wrong for them this season. I think from a personal perspective, in terms of Eddie Nketiah, I think he's trying to do too much. Even some of the shots that he's taking, it's just low value shots, but just taking them for the sake of taking them to try and get maybe that monkey off his back of getting a goal. And if he's able to just relax a bit more, I think it will work out for him there, because I was championing him moving to Crystal Palace. But for Spurs, I think the interesting thing for me, Joe, was the substitution at halftime, taking off Maddison, bringing on Sarr. Big Ange admitted that it was a balance issue. It was a tactical decision, not an injury. And I've been calling for a couple of weeks now for Spurs to stop this thing of they're effectively playing 3 defensive-minded players, the 2 centre-backs and 1 defensive midfielder. And it's not always a defensive-minded defensive midfielder. We've seen Bentancur play there before. I don't think he's the most, you don't think of him as like a ball-winning defensive midfielder necessarily. So if you only have 3 of those, we know Poro likes to go forward, we know Doggy likes to go forward, and then everyone else in the team was basically attackers, attacking midfielders or wingers or strikers. I just thought the balance was completely off in the team. Yes, they were going to score goals, but they were also going to concede a hell of a lot. But fortunately for them, it's not a Palace from last season, end of last season they're facing. It's this season's Palace. And I think Spurs just steamrolled them in this one.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 45% off select styles. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Meaningless stuff. Why do we gift so much meaningless stuff? Tired of generic gifts and hollow trends? Shutterfly allows you to create meaningful photo gifts for your family and friends. Whether it's a cozy fleece blanket for grandma, a stunning canvas print for mom, or a mug to make dad smile. Enjoy 40% off with code MAKE40 at Shutterfly.com and make something meaningful this year. See site for more details.
With Uber Reserve, good things come to those who plan ahead. Family vacay? Reserve your ride as soon as you book your flights. To all the planners, now you can reserve your Uber ride up to 90 days in advance. See Uber app for details.
If you want me to talk fairly about Crystal Palace, I think you're talking to the wrong man. I'll talk about Spurs first, and then I'll laugh for half an hour about Crystal Palace. I mean, yeah, the balance issue with Spurs is there for all to see. I mean, I saw it in the flesh when they came to the Amex and they were 2-0 up and cruising. They absolutely were cruising. And I was sort of dreading the second half, thinking this is going to be 4-5-0. And it just went completely pear-shaped. And they're another team that have such a fragile mentality that when something slight goes wrong, it could all go very, very wrong very quickly. I do hope that they steamroll Crystal Palace this weekend. The Crystal Palace misery is something that I am relishing in. The fact that they were so optimistic at the end of last season, of finishing above us finally after 4 or 5 years of not doing so. Congratulations to them. I'll send their trophy through the post. It's extremely funny to watch as a Brighton fan. I mean, you know, Did they replace well after selling Elise? Probably not. Does Eze have the right mentality to still be at Crystal Palace? Probably not. He's probably got his eyes elsewhere. We all know that Mark Guehi was in transfer talks with Newcastle, and that didn't come to fruition. And he says he's loyal to Crystal Palace, but I think if another big transfer comes in for him next summer, that he could be off as well. So I think it's something that the Crystal Palace have always struggled to do, is replacing their star players. And I think they were lucky when Zaha left that they had Eze and Elise coming through. They were unlucky with the fact that they were injured so much. And, it could have been a very different story for Crystal Palace over the last season if they had stayed fit for the whole time. And, they're very influential players. There's no denying that. But you can't rely on individuals to pull you out of moments like that. They relied on the new manager bounce last season under Glasner with Mateta playing out of his skin. And now that confidence has gone in Mateta. You then start to worry, I don't, but they would be then now starting to worry that, who is going to be that guy to pull us out of this mess again? Are we going to have to rinse and repeat, get rid of Glasner and get someone else in? It just seems to be a very vicious cycle at Crystal Palace that I think, and I'm not just saying this as a Brighton fan, people will say that I am, but I think this vicious cycle will get them relegated eventually. Whether it's this year, I'm not sure. I think they will pull themselves out of it somehow. But they can't keep operating the way they're operating. But for me as a Brighton fan, I'd love to see them get relegated. A lot of Brighton fans will say, no, I don't want them relegated because I love to play them every season and take 6 points off of them. But yeah, those games stress me out far too much than I care to admit.
Yeah, in terms of score prediction,
I think Spurs win this one 64-0. No, I'm joking. Spurs will win this one probably 3-0.
I've got 4-0. Yeah, I think Spurs score in waves. If you watch their games, 2 or 3 goals within the space of 10 minutes or so. I can see in either half them having 2 of those spells and just, as I said, running over them. Let's move on to West Ham versus Man United. I think the big thing for West Ham is obviously Kudus will be missing for this one. Probably a player that they would have thought would be a key player for them if they were to get something from this game. I think from a system perspective, the biggest worry for me with West Ham, with Lopetegui, is his system is meant to stop conceding goals in transition, and yet they're conceding an awful lot of goals in transition. And Man United, whether or not they know it, are a transition football team. They like to put the ball out wide early, get their wingers running one-on-one, isolated against either fullbacks or centre-backs that have been pulled out wide. And based on what I'm seeing from both teams over the last couple of games, I think this game is tailor-made for Man United to deploy that transition style of football away from home and execute and end up winning this one maybe 2-0, 2-1. I'm still hopping the fence between the two of those, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, Manchester United were a team that I was impressed with at the end of last season. They obviously needed that bounce before the FA Cup final, and obviously they won a trophy, and they came to our place and they beat us 2-0 at the end of the season, and they did so convincingly. And at the start of this season, whilst we beat them, and we were very fortunate to beat them, I think they looked really, really dangerous in the wide areas that you've obviously mentioned. Garnacho was having a whale of a time. Amad Diallo looked really, really good. Garnacho gave us so many issues. And Xerxes as well looked really, really good as well. And now they got Rasmus Højlund coming back and scored at the weekend. So I think there's probably a a bad time to play Manchester United. I think they've probably got quite a lot of confidence at the moment. But again, I've spoken so much about the fragility of mentality in a lot of these teams, and I think United are one of those. So if West Ham can score early and rattle the Eric Ten Hag cage a little bit, I think they could have a successful afternoon. But I do think United will ride the waves and probably win that 1-2-0.
Yeah. 2-0 sounds just about right. In terms of my score prediction, I'm going to go with 2-0 as well. I think it just makes sense for Man United to walk into that game and it then play into their hands with transition football. But let's move on to the last game of the weekend. Maybe I'm biased, but I do think many will think it the game of the weekend. But I have a prediction in terms of how it's going to play out. I think they're going to build it up as the game of the weekend. They're going to build it up as an early, maybe title contenders type of game. You know how Sky Sports like to do their Sunday, Super Sunday games and stuff like that. And I think these two teams are going to play a boring game. I think Arsenal are going to sit back and try and play on the counter-attack. We know last week, Mikel Arteta went to Bournemouth with, pretty much a backline of centre-backs and 3 DMs in midfield. I can see something similar in this game against Liverpool. And then we know Liverpool are playing a bit more of a patient style under Slot than they did under Jurgen Klopp. So I can see this ending up being not as dramatic a game as maybe some people will be hoping for. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Liverpool win. What are you feeling for this one?
Yeah, I don't think people are giving Liverpool enough credit as they should be. And I know I'm talking to a Liverpool fan, so I'm not going to sort of glow you up too much and make your head too big for your shoulder.
No, by all means, please.
I do think people maybe wrote Liverpool off at the start of the season. They were a team in the transition going from Jurgen Klopp, the stability that he brought and the trophies that he brought. Can Arne Slot replicate that success? And I think that they're playing in a way that I think Liverpool fans should be really excited about. They seem to be clinical when they need to be, and they have a great culture around that football club. And I watch Liverpool closely now because of Alexis McAllister. I think he's one of the most incredible people in football. He's just such a lovely guy, such a lovely aura about him, and he is just a fantastic footballer. And I'm so glad he's doing well at Liverpool, and Liverpool fans seem to really, really like him. And I would love to see Alexis McAllister with a Premier League medal. Whilst he couldn't do that at Brighton, of course, I would love it to see him with a little bit of silverware with Liverpool and be as successful as he can be, because he gave this football club so much. He put this football club on the map when he won the World Cup with Argentina, and something that we'll forever be grateful for was the time that we had with Alexis. So yeah, I hope that he's successful. I hope that Liverpool is successful this weekend, just because I want to see Leandro Trossard get all stroppy and walk off the pitch again, because I think he's such a little petulant child. So yeah, I'm going for a. Do you know what? 3-0 Liverpool.
Oh wow!
I think Arsenal are fragile at the moment, very, very fragile. So yeah, it could be interesting. Just something else to point out as well, as we're recording, the Champions League is going on. Dortmund are beating Real Madrid 2-0.
Yep.
Crazy.
It's crazy. It's absolutely great. But I've always found Real Madrid in the group stage of Champions League, they do have results like this. And then somehow in the knockout stages, they become Real Madrid and go and win another one. But yeah, I think I would definitely welcome that 3-0 Liverpool win. I think the Liverpool fan in me can see that. I think Arsenal are there for the taking this season. I just think Arteta is going to sit back and make it as difficult as possible for Liverpool to score, and they're going to equally try and maybe get a goal off a set piece or something is going to be the game plan. It's going to be such a negative game plan from Arteta, but it's going to be about just getting a result. And I think that is going to make for maybe a slightly more boring game than people would be wanting, because I think Arne Slot is going to be emphasizing to his players to be patient. Don't go, overexert yourselves in terms of going to chase a goal too early and leave yourselves exposed to the counter-attack. Because the worst thing that can happen for Liverpool in this game is to concede early, because then Arsenal are going to sit even deeper, and it's just going to become an even worse game, in my opinion. So yeah, hopefully Liverpool go and win that one. I always said, I think Jurgen Klopp, the manager, was no longer Jurgen Klopp that we knew and loved in terms of Jurgen Klopp, the manager. And I always thought Liverpool could replace Jurgen Klopp, the manager. I just thought it was always going to be really hard to replace Jurgen Klopp, the man, because of everything that he represents as a human being. I think he's one of the good ones, should I say. But in terms of him as a manager, I do think there were either the players weren't maybe responding to his message after having listened to it for so long, or it just wasn't gelling in some way or form. And I think more could have been gotten out of the Liverpool squad that he had. So yeah, I did think the manager could be replaced, but maybe the man was going to be a lot harder. And we know Liverpool are an emotional club, and it's very difficult to separate a man and a manager if you're talking about the same person. So I understand why sometimes I get pushback when I say that. But Joe, that is going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. Do you have anything you want to plug, put over, or promote before we wrap up?
Just to invite people, if they want to learn more about the Brighton Hove Albion story, to head over to the Albion Obsessed, YouTube channel. We do have a documentary on there, which we shot last year in August through to September. And we spoke to the very lovely Fatboy Slim, aka Norman Cook, about his reminiscence of our old home, the Withdean Stadium, and we got access all areas to our old home, and we got to sort of reminisce with some old fans, and they got to go back to where they used to sit and everything like that. It was a really nice thing to do, especially in our first season in Europe, just to sort of humble ourselves a little bit, remember where we came from, and just go back to our not humble beginnings, because we had a stadium before that, the Goldston Ground, and that's now a retail park. So we can't go back there and do a similar documentary. But yeah, anything else as well, Brighton Hove Albion, we do a 4-week roundup every week, like a podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you want to learn everything about Brighton Hove Albion, come over to us and we'll be happy to have you.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, definitely go and check all of that stuff. Go like the video as well, so that it obviously gets more exposure to other people. Guys, from my end, go and check out all the content on EPL Index website. Their match previews, post-match reviews, player performances, all of the news that you guys could wish for. Go and check out the daily podcast show. It's the Two-Footer podcast with Dave Hendrick, where he discusses the hottest topics in football. Finally, also check out the new show that comes out on Sunday evenings, the Final Whistle podcast, where Nina and Ben host guests, and they look back at the weekend of EPL football. Obviously, we preview the game week and they review the game week, and it comes out on Sunday night, which is quite perfect, really.
They can laugh at all of our predictions.
Yeah, exactly that. Except the one that you predicted for Liverpool Arsenal. I think that one is the one that they're going to be reveling in after that comes true. Guys, go and check out this show's Twitter page. I always call it Twitter, at A Tad Predictable. Go and follow at EPL Index on Twitter. Subscribe to EPL Index podcast channel on your podcast providers. Give us 5 stars. Write some positive comments if you guys feel so inclined. That stuff really does help us out. I've been Tadiwa Chinakira. You can find me on the Twitter handle at Tad Predicts. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA, and Jodie, she's at Spursy141 for our guest intros. Our producer behind the glass, Mr. Guy Drinkle, he's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. He's been Joe at Sayers BHAFC. You should know what that stands for, people. On Twitter. And remember, Chisingaperi.
from Mo
Chino
Salah.
Shura.
And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a go and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans. De Bruyne.
And it is Ward-Prowse. Martinelli fortress. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Get the fuel you need for anything you set out to do. Fuel for energy without the crash afterwards. Fuel for an even, balanced mood. Fuel for focus and endurance to go one more mile. Fuel for finishing that project for the board. Fuel that is pure, consistent, and high-quality natural kratom. Fuel that you trust with over 10 years to back it up. Fuel your hustle whenever and wherever you need it with MIT 45 Go. Visit MIT45.com for details.